Today's guest has lived leadership where it counts, in the world of policing, where pressure is real and every decision matters. Mark Stephen learned early that leadership isn't about rank or title. It's about people, passion, commitment, trust, the so-called soft skills that are anything but soft when everything's on the line. Now he's made it his mission to help others build teams that perform not out of fear, but out of belief, to create cultures where honesty and safety fuel real results. This is leadership beyond the technical. This is the human edge. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Mark Stephen to the show.
You'll never know unless you try. The limits way up in the sky. Don't let it all go passing by. You know you only get one life.
Mark, how you doing? Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Charles, it's great to see you and great to meet you this morning. I believe a very early 6 a.m. across there in Philadelphia. Is it Philadelphia you're based?
Yes, Philadelphia.
A very good morning to you. But yeah, it's great to see you and speak to you at long last.
Well, thank you. And I know I appreciate you doing this right as it closes in on your lunchtime over there. So it's always, I'm always grateful when guys jump on here and spend some time. So thank you.
Very, very well. I'm looking forward to it.
So Mark, with that being said, for the audience, would you mind starting off with a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, my name's Mark Stephen. I'm currently a leadership and performance coach, working kind of for myself in the kind of grounds of my business, Tully Allen Consultancy, where I do associate work with kind of many organisations, and then also I'm founder of a new business. It's very, very much in its infancy, an organisation called Culture Elevate, where we actually look at transforming cultural on all bases. I've been doing that for probably about 3 or 4 years now. Charles, prior to that, I was a police officer here in the UK, based here in Scotland, for the best part of 23 years, with a heavy blend of operational policing, kind of out there doing the good job and fighting the fight. But then the last sort of 7 years of that, actually, I fell into leadership and development, where I was jointly responsible for the recruitment the training of recruits within the organisation. So, yeah, a bit of a difference from kind of policing and into the world that I'm operating now.
Yeah, well, I know coming from a family of, there's police officers in my family over here in Philadelphia, also have family military. So definitely appreciate that job that you did for so long of policing. So maybe Mark might be a great place to start. So your background as a police officer, it gives you a front seat to leadership under what I'll call real pressure. What did those experiences teach you about leading when that pressure was on and the stakes were sometimes life or death?
Yeah, I mean, with hindsight, there's a lot of criticism of policing, sometimes rightly so, but sometimes I think it's actually really unjust. But if we actually look at the kind of leadership thinking and decision making in that regard, is in the time of disruption, confrontation, challenge, where critical decisions need to be made, sometimes you just need to stop and just take that step back and actually assess what's going on in and around you, listen, feel and understand actually what's going on, and then actually use that as a basis to really orientate where your decision goes, and then ultimately where your leadership actually then follows in that regard. So again, some people think it's a science. There is a science to it, but sometimes it's just actually just taking that step back and being a human and actually exhibiting the right behaviour to inform your decision making to allow you to go and act that basically. So yeah, I learned a lot. I learned an awful lot. Made a lot of mistakes along the way. There's no doubt about that. There's no ifs, buts and maybes. But I'd like to say that certainly when I came to the end of my time in policing, through my own choice, I may add that I'd done more good than bad.
Yeah, I like the way you framed that too. And you mentioned the word human there. when you were saying that. Um, Saying that and mentioning about taking a step back and being human. I noticed that you talk a lot about non-technical attributes in regards to being human. So those attributes, trust, respect, adaptability. Why do you believe they are real performance drivers in any team?
Well, if I look at it in the kind of the current world that I operate in now, so for example, culture transformation, the way I look at it is culture is, it can be words, the values that are pasted on a wall, or they can be these kind of, fluffy words of resilience and agility. But for me, to make those things happen, you need to have sound, strong behavior. And to allow that behavior to come to life, you need to be yourself. So for me, organizations, and when we talk about culture transformation, and even in policing, if you actually look at policing, that's in essence a form of culture transformation. It's just taking a step back, moving the law manuals to the side, or in the current world in high hazard and oil and gas or mining, is move those kind of manuals to the side and actually just look at the real behaviors. And if you get the behaviors right, then the values come to life. Then resilience actually starts to present itself. Then agility starts to present. That's when change starts to take place. But to get to the behaviors takes time. And I sometimes think we lose sight, particularly nowadays, that we're all human. We're all human. And to allow us to actually really perform at that organizational level or on a personal level, we need to be given the space to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you really, I'm definitely, I sit here now and listening to you, I'm looking forward already to listening back to this and picking up on some of the things that you mentioned there. I think you said a good bit there, and there is a lot to unpack. Um, Mark, and I don't like to talk about it from this perspective too often, but if we're being honest, especially in today, with today's everything in this world, I think we see a lot of what the cost of poor leadership looks like. Um, what do you think separates leaders who just manage from those who truly look to lead and inspire?
Yeah, so it's a good question. If we kind of look at leaders who manage, what they create is ultimately an environment of learned helplessness amongst their team, because they're always under pressure. They're always under pressure to do this, do this, do this. And the leader truly micromanages them their way through a day-to-day kind of way of life in the workplace. For me, what makes a leader different is not sitting on that person's shoulders all the time. It's about identifying a clear purpose, first and foremost. I mean, let's be clear. Leaders should define what their purpose is, what the mission is, and make sure that his or her workforce are on the mission, but do so with passion, ultimately with passion. But to make that come alive, exhibit their true values, exhibit true, strong human personal behaviors to allow those individuals to step up. By being authentic and being an authentic leader, people are more relaxed. People are all more relaxed. I mean, I certainly feel that, and I try that in everything that I do day to day, whether it's leadership at work or leadership here at home, here in Scotland with my children, is that we're not all perfect. So being authentic and being honest and true and displaying that allows people to kind of declutter and remove themselves from the weeds to be themselves, and to actually then go out and commit to work rather than being managed their way through work. I'm doing a lot of work just now with an organisation whereby I'm trying to get a certain level of, let's say, management to kind of get from the whole place of waiting to be told what to do. What I'm trying to get them to get into a mindset of is reviewing themselves, then acting, or indeed actually getting to the point where they act and then report back. So they're not waiting for their manager, whoever that me, to say, do this and do that, because that just declutters things. All that does is creates a real environment of their helplessness. I'll just wait and do what I'm told when I'm told. So for me, it's about a true leader is creating that enabling environment to define a purpose, do it with passion, to exemplify and display real core values and behaviours, and then being vulnerable in themselves. But again, being consistent with that throughout their kind of the leadership view and approach.
Mark, I love that. I don't love it because it's. I love the way you said it. Learned helplessness. I never really thought of it that way. As we have teams and thinking about how we look to build teams and our next, layer of leaders, and creating an environment of learned helplessness. That's a really good point you brought out there. The other thing I think from what you said there, from from the person being the leader, what do you try to convey to leaders, Mark, who seem to be afraid to let go? They may be afraid of, oh, if I develop this person too much, I might be out of a job, or they might become better than me. How do you get leaders to kind of be selfless?
Yeah, that is a really difficult question, because again, we talk a lot about enablement of teams, but I also understand that they maybe want to have their hand on the tiller to make sure that they don't give too much. So therefore, their kind of skill set, their kind of reputation is denigrated in some way, shape, or form. But I'll be honest with you, there's something that I picked up some time ago. It was from a fantastic performance coach and psychologist, Jamil Qureshi. And he talks about, if an organization knew what an organization knows, they'd be 3 times as better. So in other words, allowing and ensuring that leader has the comfort to know that he or she has the human capital in their team, the real knowledge to provide the solutions that will actually support them for growth. So it's almost like a two-way process. You scratch my back, I will scratch yours. By enabling you to step up and I suppose promote a more divergent way of thinking, there'll be benefit and success for the team. But ultimately, everyone's going to get success from that by unlocking that. And I suppose it's just trying to get into that mindset and just trying to shift that thinking from a leader, that if we all approach it, we're all open, we have that divergent approach and way of thinking, there's nothing but benefit for all.
Yeah, no, I think, and thanks for sharing that from what you've learned from that performance coach. I think that's really, I think people listening will take a lot of value in that, and I think you framed it perfectly. Look, I'm podcast host by, day, but I have another career that I'm trying to develop my own leadership and grow and be better. And, quite frankly, I think, selfishly, this podcast is as much for me to learn as for anybody.
Yeah.
So no, I really appreciate the way you said that. Mark, when I listen to your answer there, I think about trust, and it's unfortunate, but I think trust is that thing. It takes a long time to build, but it really only takes seconds or one action to lose. If that unfortunately happens, how can a leader rebuild that trust once it's broken?
Again, that's you're firing the difficult questions today, Charles, which is good. You're literally keeping me on my toes here. But yeah, again, I think, to create an environment of trust, there needs to be trust 2 ways. And I come back to that first question you asked about, what would you kind of look for in a true leader? For me, it's creating an environment whereby that person is authentic. So if I am a leader, if I'm authentic, and if I actually, exemplify, there's a lot of discussion in academia around human organizational performance principles. So those are errors normal, blame fixes nothing, context drives behavior, learning is vital, and how you respond matters. If you actually absorb yourself and say, look, I'm not perfect in this environment either. I am a leader. I'm here as much as you are to learn, and I will be exposed to the same mistakes and potentially making the same mistakes as you will. Then that person can see that they're actually dealing with a human. Again, I come back to the whole values and behavior conversation. If an individual sees that this person standing before them is human, is humble, is authentic, also makes mistakes, then I think people then start to build trust. I mean, if I go back to the policing career, I dealt with and interacted with some very, very strong leaders. I also interacted with some very poor leaders. And when I think about that question of trust, why didn't I trust them? It was as if they were the solution. They were the only solution. They're the leader. They have all the answers. I will tell you how to go about and enact your role and perform your role. Whereas the true leaders that I work with, and I work with a leader now even in the new world, by them being humble, authentic, true and honest, that built the trust. That built more trust in me that I could offer if I'd made a mistake, or I could offer if I was maybe struggling with a particular challenge, work challenge or personal challenge, because they were human. And again, I come back to that. What makes that difference is values and behaviour. That informs the trust and builds the trust ultimately.
Yeah, Mark, I really love the way you're outlining all that. And I think throughout this conversation, the one thing that's really becoming quite clear is that human element, that human capital. And isn't it funny how in pretty much all walks of life, whether it's leadership, whatever the career is, that if we just all kind of step back, look across at the individual before us and know that they're human like we are, it feels like whatever the circumstance, it becomes better just by taking that, that step and understanding we're all human. So I really providing, you said I'm firing with the tough questions. You're really, you're hitting them out of the park here, so to speak. A lot of value you're giving with your answers. And I appreciate the thoughtful answer. So thanks for that. You mentioned something there, and as I was preparing for this podcast, I did see this, and you just mentioned it a little bit in that last segment, that last answer. I saw somewhere where you say that teams perform best when they want to, not when they have to. I think that's really important. How, though? How do we as leaders really, because most people go, regardless of what I say, Mark, or what you say, I have to do this, right? How do we get it to be overcome that I have to, they know they have to, but that they want to?
Yeah, again, it's a difficult place to be because, again, I'm not saying this is a holistic approach across all organisations, but we do have pockets of this learned helplessness. I'll go back to that again, whereby people just turn up, they do what they need to do, and they go home, and then they get the paycheck every month, and then that's the kind of system. It's almost like a wash, rinse, repeat kind of approach throughout life. Now, if that's what you want to do, then cool, go for it. But you can't then have much recourse in saying, I'm being told to do this, these things are wrong, the things I've been told to do are wrong. You have no right to challenge that because you're just caught in this cycle of learned helplessness. Or you're overt, you actually choose to work in that environment. For me, you actually need to kind of disrupt that almost. And as I say, that's the difficult bit. And I talk a lot about, in an organisation that I do associate work with, an organisation called Bit of Soak. And in my own business with Culture Elevate, we talk a lot about psychological safety. So to allow somebody to step up and offer solutions and to offer insights and reflections, sometimes that's very easy to do. Sometimes that's naturally there. But in a lot of organisations, that has to be broken down. So to build psychological safety is a really, really difficult thing to do. And again, to allow that to happen, you need to come back again to certain types of leadership behaviours or habits that need to be demonstrated by a leader, a manager, a team supervisor, to allow that conversation to happen, to allow that psychological safety to come to life. Once you've kind of cracked that, then that whole diversity of thought thing starts to appear. I'm a big believer. We talk a lot about, marginal gains, and it's a well-trodden term. It's used certainly across here in the UK, but we use the whole kind of 1% change piece. So if we make a 1% change, then we'll get there. There was actually some research done in that regard by the Harvard Business Review, and they basically said to a team, right, take a diary, and over the next X amount of months, write down your daily tasks, write down what you've done that day and what the outcomes were. And then post that exercise, they said, right, go back to the diary and tell me what day made you most fulfilled. What day made you actually think, I've turned up and I've done something really good there. And it was actually when they'd made some positive change, that 1% of change. To get to that point, you need to build psychological safety and you need to promote diversity of thought. Come back to that saying again, for an organisation new, what an organisation knows, be 3 times as better. And then that starts to lift. People become more involved then. And it's well, the people far more intelligent than me through science have actually identified that if a person commits to something, they're more likely to get involved in it from an organisational perspective or from a team perspective. And that for me is where you make the change. Psychological safety, diversity of thought, and making that different. People then turn up, make that change, even though it's 1%. But imagine 100 people within the team or an organisation making that 1%. You'd be stupid to turn that down. And again, as I say, within the Culture Elevate piece, as I say, an organisation I've co-founded, we have 6 strands that we look at to elevate culture. And one of them is diversity of thought and psychological safety. So easier said than done, but there are gains to be had if you create that environment. And let's face it, that comes down to the leadership at all levels to create that environment.
Yeah, I love that bit you just talked about there about keeping the diary. Obviously you said extremely, the Harvard Business Review, extremely smart people, but hearing that, it kind of hit me. I'm like, I never even thought of that. Like I think all organizations, they do, they do surveys about, are you fulfilled? And hearing you say that and thinking about it though, we always ask people about how they feel fulfilled in a large scale, like time frame. It's something interesting. I'll be honest with you. I might actually start to try something like that myself as almost like a little fulfillment tracker. Let's just start to really focus on it day by day and start to do some comparative analysis on what was it that made you more fulfilled this day versus this day? Is there more opportunity in what makes you more fulfilled? No, that was really, really valuable. Thanks. And Mark, if I could, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you? Were you going to say something?
I was going to add on that point there, but I talked about 5 human organisational performance kind of principles. And one is learning is vital. Again, but by keeping simple records or just recalling positive events that have happened, whether it's in the workplace or at home, that's where the learning takes place. But again, how you respond to that matters. It's fine to learn and have it there in this little pocket, in this cupboard or a filing cabinet. You need to bring it out and make that come to life. Like you say, what was different that day, and learn from that and then respond to that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. You got my mind racing here as I'm like, I wonder how to try to incorporate something like that. No, that's really, really good. Mark, I did want to ask too, you mentioned psychological safety. Could you maybe just go, a little bit more into that? Like, I never heard that term. I'm interested to hear what is that? Is there pillars with that? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a concept widely, researched and publicized by Professor Amy Edmondson, who talks about psychological safety. And again, I'm not going to go into it in any academic format because, as I say, people far more intelligent than me can kind of doff their cap to that. But for me, psychological safety, it's almost like a team phenomenon. So if I think of a previous career in policing, there was high elements of psychological safety within my team. So everything was on the table. Everyone had the opportunity to speak out. Everyone could speak out. There was nobody felt that if they did offer a suggestion or an insight or an idea, that they'd be subdued. Because again, if you have poor psychological safety, generally people will feel that they can't speak. They're maybe scared of repercussions from the line manager. Somebody offers a suggestion, shut up, don't speak, you're here to work, not here to talk. That type of kind of rhetoric and that kind of behaviour. When I started in policing, I didn't have the confidence to say something because I thought if I say something, I'm the new guy here, I'm going to look stupid. It's probably going to be the wrong thing. But 9 times out of 10, it's actually the right thing. It was just something that wasn't on the table. It wasn't out there for discussion. So for me, psychological safety is creating an environment whereby you can have those conversations. But there's a guard to that in that that's not being nice and fluffy. Psychological safety is actually having some really tough conversations. And I'm kind of laughing as I'm talking through this. So with the new organisation that I've started, Culture Elevate, I work with 2 other partners, Alan Devine and Andrew Park, who we've both, well, all 3 of us have worked together in the world of policing. And there's psychological safety within the environment because people say things. They say things because they're well evidenced, they're well proportionate, it's the right thing to say, but it's maybe not what the other 2 guys want to hear. It's that kind of tough love, that tough conversation. So for me, that's I mean, a really high level overview of what psychological safety is. It's almost a form of trust, but within that team environment, where people can speak, people do feel free to discuss and share what they think, feel. But again, it's not about being nice. It's being about proportionate. It's been about being direct, but about doing it for the right purpose. And again, creating an environment for that is important.
No, thanks for going through that. I think throughout my career, it made me think of something I heard before somebody said, and I've been fortunate. I've had great leaders that I've had the chance to learn and be, part of their teams. Unfortunately, though, I do see my share of what I've heard described before is they have spotlight syndrome. It's all about them.
Mm-hmm.
They have to hear themselves speak regardless of if it makes sense or not. It's all about them. And, I heard before a talk and I thought it was poignant. And when you were talking, it reminded me of this. It was like, when you see spotlight syndrome, there's a high chance that it's toxic within your organization and you have to look to either change it or remove it. And I think it gets to that point about the difficult conversation and, sometimes the truth, it doesn't like to be heard, but no, that was really good what you went through. Mark, you touched a little bit on it. And, for me, I've been in a career where I'll say it, I'm definitely a little bit of a data geek. I love analytics. I love analysis. You mentioned about there's use of behavioral and analytics in your work. How does data support leadership development without losing that human touch?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose from an organizational perspective, if we look at a measurement or diagnostics, what that does is basically, for me, it identifies an organization's blind spots. So we actually take a step back. If we were to do a diagnostic and be sure that how that's controlled and the environment around that is one of confidentiality, where people can speak, because again, bear in mind, a lot of things might have resulted from a cultural perspective. There might be poor culture around psychological safety. We need to make sure that people are psychologically safe to speak into a diagnostic or a measurement or a survey of some kind. But for me, what that does is identifies the blind spots, the hot spots, the green spots, the positive spots of the organizational culture, in whatever regard that might be. It could be around safety culture, it could be around growth mindset, it could be around collaboration, whatever the case may be. But actually, this allows an organization or the leadership to stop and pause and see where the blind spots are, based on anecdotal information, based on the kind of rhetoric and the voice of the workforce that gives us data to better inform, well, where are the gaps. But again, I come back to those human organizational performance principles, is that's good. That's a lot of good learning there. You've identified the gaps in culture or leadership or whatever it may be, but it's how you respond to that that then makes the difference. Because I've certainly been party to, and I'm sure you maybe have as well, Charles, as I've engaged in a wellbeing survey or some sort of workforce engagement survey, and I'm thinking things are going to change. Here we go. This is it. This is my chance to say how I feel in a way that offers anonymity. I'm going to see change, and then nothing happens, and then the next one comes out. That for me is where the tripwire is. These assessments, the data that's kind of born from these assessments, are vital. As I say, I'll reiterate, gives you the blind spots. Almost it gives you a bit of a gap analysis of where the organisation is. Good, but that needs to inform the leadership to then go and act. Intent into action is so important. How you respond matters is so important. And that's for me what the kind of leadership need to really focus on and grasp onto post-measurement.
No, that's all good. I'm curious of your opinion on this. And I want your opinion about from an organization perspective, but I feel like sometimes as organizations are missing the mark here when it comes to those types of surveys. Do you ever feel like sometimes the mark is missed because they're kind of generic? And sometimes I feel like the timing, there's so many things going on. They really miss the mark of getting a true, honest assessment because I feel like a lot of times these assessments, they're just asking for what I call the negative, non-constructive feedback. It's like, and I think as organizations, as employees, as, workers, we owe the organization to kind of get our emotions in check and kind of give back that honest, constructive feedback. But Mark, I think that's difficult. And I think organizations, I don't know how they do it, but I think they're making a mistake sometimes and missing the mark. Do you have any thoughts on how can they really truly get constructive feedback that makes change possible?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it comes around, and I've those who work with me or have worked with me will probably laugh if they watch this back. But I have a real bee in my bonnet about communication. So if we're going to do an assessment, that's good. It's fine and well. But the communication and marketing around that is so important. So it's almost like, this is what we can see. So for example, we're doing a cultural diagnostic or a cultural measurement. This is the pulse that we're getting from an organisation at the minute. But what we're actually going to do now is do the ECG. We're actually going to go into a lot more detail as to what's really happening. Where are we missing things? But that comes through the communication piece, but also post survey. I've seen all too often, and I have become incredibly frustrated that I've actually seen some really good work. So some really good surveys have been done, some really good work. They've identified blind spots. They've actually identified some real positive aspects of organisational work and performance and discipline, really good bits. But we don't bang the drum enough about it. So here are the good spots. Keep that going. Let's learn from that. Let's build on that. Let's amplify that. We've also got some areas we need to work on, but we don't stop there. It's almost going from transactional, this is the survey, to transformational. What happens beyond that is equally as important. But that comes out in the marketing, that comes out in the communication. So people just don't go, well, here's another survey. I'll have this press A, C, D, E, and then crack on with the day. It just defeats, it extinguishes the real purpose behind a survey. So for me, the whole comms and marketing piece is so important, but also the buy-in from the leadership that they're doing it for the right reasons. I come back to purpose and passion. If the leadership you really identify that, really exhibit that in any kind of, survey that they do, then they'll actually get more people to jump on board. It comes back to that trust thing.
Mm.
They are here to make a change. They want to make a change for the better. I can see it. I can feel it. Then I'll engage more. But as I say, it's a tough one. It's a real tough one. But the communication and marketing behind these things is so important. But the action that comes beyond that is, if not the same importance, it's more important.
And no, Mark, I agree. And I think, again, you mentioned that, so, like, I'm going to be talking about this for probably a few weeks with people that I work with, the psychological safety and the communication. No, it's really, really good stuff. I'll say this to what you just said in that last kind of question. I think when it comes to data and analysis, most times we're taught in any types of statistics, we want to throw out the lowest and the highest. I honestly feel, though, that when it comes to human capital and these types of surveys, I think more important are the lowest and the highest. And I feel like the mark that's missed is if you look to do a post survey follow up on the best and the worst, that's probably where your organizational answers for improvement will lie. You'll find out what's wrong at the bottom of it, what's good at the top of it, and you'll be able to then spread that throughout the whole
Yeah.
organization and the culture. I think that's the part they miss a lot. Um, well, again, we talked a little bit. You mentioned about adaptability, I believe, in one of your answers. We're all in, you know, our daily lives, our work environments, things tend to not go as planned. Mark, what does, as far as adaptability, I mean, it's a word we always hear, but how do we incorporate that when things are really starting to go not so well?
Yeah, again, that's a difficult thing to actually provide an answer to, because I've been asked that a lot. Tell me how you should be more adaptable. I may be made of a slightly different cloth than some other people. But I always try and look where I possibly can in any situation and say, right, well, if that situation changes in the workplace, or where it may be, is, you know, some of the changes are actually not the best. They're not the great for that time being. But it's actually saying, right, well, what can I actually do to change my focus and outlook to make this into a positive? It's almost turning it from a negative into a positive, almost. And there's times of that, certainly personally, I've encountered some bad news. It would be incredibly easy for me to say, well, this is life now. This is it. I just need to just suck it up and get on with it. And then before I know it, I'm actually going against what I can advocate, and I become absorbed in this learned helplessness piece. Life's thrown me a dummy. I just need to get on with it. For me, it's about, well, what can I now do? What can I change? How can I adapt to this new environment to then build upon it? And again, that comes down to, the whole mindset piece, rather than being that kind of closed. And again, I'll put my cards on the table firmly, Charles. There's times that I've in the past had a very closed mindset, but I recognized that very early on and had to do something different. So I adapted. I adapted how I approach things, how I think about things, how I reflect upon things, so I can actually make some real positive, palpable, meaningful change out of a real, excuse the language, shitty situation. And as I say, I encountered something very, very similar recently. Old Mark probably described this, sulked and just got his head down and moaned about it. New Mark made that into a positive. So for me, it's about just trying to just turn that into a positive. Easier said than done, but again, with a real growth mindset and an open mindset, you can start to change and shift things that is for the benefit for yourself and for those around about you ultimately.
Yeah, I love that you said about in the same sentence, growth mindset and open mindset. I think that's really, really important for people. I think, Mark, for me, adaptability, I feel like it just came with age. As I'm obviously older than you, I feel like the older I get, the more adaptable I become. And I start to think back a little bit. I think it's just because you see so much as you get older, and I used to laugh when people would say, "Oh, I'm telling you this." The old guys, right, tell me this, and I'd say, "Yeah, right, you're full of crap," right? But
Mhm.
now I get it now, and I like the way you said about turning that positive, and I think that has a lot to do with it, just trying to be positive. Mark, I wanted to ask you, uh, is there a defining moment in your life or career that you would say really reshaped how you view leadership?
Yeah, yeah. Well, without going into specifics, because I don't want this to turn into a kind of negative viewpoint on policing, because I still have a lot of, certainly here in the UK, I have a huge belief in UK policing. I still have family members who are in the police, so I still advocate and, sitting out from the sidelines and cheerlead, and in a very difficult environment, particularly here in the UK just now. There's a lot of policing is really under the microscope, particularly within the Metropolitan Police in London. So I don't want this to start as a negative, rhetoric or kind of conversation. But there was a defining moment when I was, as I say, I was very fortunate. I was jointly responsible for the training of recruits at Tullyallen, which is actually the name of the company. It's a castle where all the recruits go for training. And I'd sat in on the Friday. I'd sat in a leadership course, and actually delivered a small presentation about the training that recruits go through nowadays, so the leaders were up to date with it. And as I say, without going into specifics, but I sat there and I thought, my good God, this is the leadership, the future leadership of the organisation. Some real positive, strong leaders within that, I will add. But I would say they were the minority in that the leaderships that I saw, or some of the leaders that I saw, didn't really have that real human leadership behaviour that I was talking about before. And there's a lot of conversation talks about substance and style. I felt that they maybe had a lot of style. They could maybe talk a lot of good things and use very fancy academic, words, but if you actually strip that back to the substance, I didn't really see a leader in them. And they were going to be my leaders in essence. And I remember coming home and speaking, to my wife and saying, look, this is what a challenge today. This is a challenge for me. And it didn't sit very well with me. And then the Monday morning, I went out along with a group of instructors, and there was 280 new recruits came on to the parade square of the Scottish Police College. And again, a lot of good officers, I'm sure, were in there. But I looked at a lot of them and I thought, I don't think you really understand that you need to bring leadership skills to the organisation from day one. That yes, you're a recruit, but you're actually a leader as well. And I looked at a lot of them, and this, again, the behavioural aspect of it, I thought we're missing a trick here. So if we've got the leadership at this level, true leadership, and leadership at this level, and there's gaps, I thought I've got to make a change. And again, when you talk about adaptability and mindset, I kind of lived up until a point of just getting through each day. And I thought, screw this. So I went up to my office with my wife and said, I'm leaving the police. So a pretty defining moment. Without going into specifics, it's difficult for me to actually contextualise how I felt. But at that time, I thought we maybe missed a trick with some of the leadership here. They're good at filling out an application form. They're good at an interview. But from a behavioural aspect, they really didn't have the leadership traits and behaviours that I would expect to see from a true leader. But again, I add with that a very, very strong note that I'm not anti-police. I'm still cheerleading from the sidelines. I still believe in policing, and certainly policing here in Scotland. But that for me was a bit of a defining moment that we maybe missed the trick with our leadership and our recruitment of leaders in an organisation.
No, thanks for sharing that. And, I didn't take it as listen, for me, I didn't take it as a negative. It was far from a negative. And I think it's unfortunate, but I think sometimes as leaders, sometimes the only way to have impact or make change is we may have to change the arena, so to speak, in order to have the best impact. So I think what you're doing, it probably was a wise choice, because even in this conversation, I am seeing a lot of wisdom and a lot of valuable insights that are coming out of it. And I guess I'll ask this to wrap up around impact. What do you hope people remember most about your message and your work, Mark?
Again, if I come back to a young Mark Stephen when I joined the police service, all I ever wanted to do was we see here in Scotland put bad people in the jail, we put people in prison. I want to take those who committed crime off the streets and ensure that we could all live safely. So with that, what did I want to do? I wanted to help people. I've always wanted to help people, whether it's people in the workplace, whether it's people in the family, within my own family, and my friends as well. I always want to help people. Even in this new world, it's still very much a focus on developing people, nurturing people, and helping people. So I suppose if I could, on the gravestone, have, he helped people, that's good enough for me, we talk a lot about success, and for me, success is personal fulfillment and happiness. I try and make people happy. I don't always do that, but if I can help and support personal fulfillment, then I'm halfway there. And if I can do that with any person I interact or deal with, then I'm good. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, we might need to get t-shirts, Mark. He made people happy. I love that slogan. I think that, you know what, when you think about how we started on this conversation about just being human, and we kind of come full circle there, and that's how it ends this conversation about, I hope it just says he made people happy. I think that sums up you as an individual in a really, really, really positive light. So Mark, thanks for your time today. If anybody wants to connect with you, get you to work with them, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm really simple. I just use LinkedIn. So you can get me on LinkedIn, Mark Stephen, also the LinkedIn page, and then also have two company pages. The first one is my own company, Tully Allen Consultancy, TULLIALLAN, Tully Allen Consultancy. Or, as I say, the new business that I've co-founded, they get me through Culture Elevate. So yeah, direct message me, or the email addresses are actually on the LinkedIn pages as well. So yeah, get me through that. Happy to catch up and see what I can do to help in any way, shape or form.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to include that information in the show notes for people to find you rather easily. I personally am glad we connected on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Glad and grateful that you agreed to jump on here today with me. I personally learned a lot, and I will be grateful for that. And I think I will be putting some of this conversation into practice. So it's probably the best compliment I could give you for
Thank
this
you.
conversation today.
Thank
So
you very
Mark,
much.
thank you. As always, appreciate everyone tuning in. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening, and remember, never hibernate on your goals.